when you know that your patients are not going to get better, they're going to pass away? How do you stay encouraged?
It is difficult to see people die. You just have to walk away for a minute, gather your thoughts, pray, and say, okay, Lord, let me finish this day with success.
You're listening to As You Go, a production of Free Will Baptist Women's Ministries. Wherever you're joining us from today, we're glad you're here. We want to grow together as disciples and as disciplers.
Hi, welcome to this episode of As You Go. I'm Ruth McDonald, the director of Free Will Baptist Women's Ministries, and your host for this podcast. I have with me today our guest, Kristen Crabtree, and I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit as she asks, as I ask, and she answers some of our questions. Welcome, Kristen. Thank you for being here. Kristen is a busy pastor's wife and an RN, and she works in hospice ministries, and that's what we want to talk about today. And she's joining us from Ohio. So,
hi, everyone.
yeah. Every time I say Ohio, I think about the Japanese word for good morning. So, Ohio, Kristen from Ohio. Kristen, where are you from originally?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, me too.
I was born in Pike County, Kentucky.
Okay.
Lived in southern West Virginia, right across the river till I was 5. Moved to East Tennessee for 2 years, and then we settled in Georgia.
Okay.
So I grew up in Georgia.
Okay.
And I'm a Georgia Bulldogs fan.
Daughter? Oh, Georgia Bulldogs fan. Okay. Were you a pastor's daughter? Or
I was not.
Why did you move around so much?
Well, his company in West Virginia transferred him to their company in East Tennessee. And then he got a better job in Georgia. He always says he was making double what he was making in Tennessee. So he found a better opportunity. It was close to my mom's parents. And so we went to Georgia, settled there, and where I'm from.
All right. So I have a hard time answering that question, where I'm from as well, because my dad was a pastor and a church planter, and he moved around a lot. I know a lot of times I find people like you and their military kids or pastors' kids. So, but I went off on the wrong guess that time. He just moved for his job, which I realize more and more people are doing these days, right?
And then he answered the call to preach while I was in college and started pastoring not long after that. So,
okay. So, Kristen, when you were a little girl, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, a couple of different things.
Okay.
This one is completely off the wall. I wanted to be an assistant PE coach.
Oh, an assistant, not a PE.
I didn't want to be the actual PE coach because I liked our assistant PE coach. She was awesome. And so I wanted to be Coach Woods.
Okay, so you wanted to be her, basically.
I did. She was so much fun to be around and everything. So, but then I also wanted to be a pediatrician.
Okay.
So I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was very, very young. I think I was 8 whenever I started wanting to be a pediatrician. I don't know how that works in the field of assistant PE coach and pediatrician, but that's where I was.
I have so much fun asking that question to all my guests because I never know what they're going to say. I make a point to not know what they're going to say so that I get my raw reaction. So, what is it you've turned out to be? Did I said you were an RN? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you didn't quite go the doctor route?
Not yet.
Not yet? You still working on it?
I'm not going to be a medical doctor, but I will. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to start school, but I'm going to do the nurse practitioner route.
It's just about a doctor, right?
And then I'll probably get my doctorate of nursing practice. That's that way I won't be a full-fledged medical doctor, but I will have that title.
That's fantastic.
So that's my goal.
I'm pulling for 50. It. Go for it, girl.
My goal by 50.
All right. That's awesome. That is really good. I like that. So, Kristen, I know you're a pastor's wife and a mother of 3, and you've been practicing as a nurse for a long time. How long have you been in hospice care?
Well, actually, I've only been a nurse for 3 years.
Oh no, I didn't know that. I've
Yeah, yeah.
been at it for forever. Good for
No,
you.
no. I started being a palliative care
From the
um,
beginning.
from the time I started here. Yep. So
So
I
did you choose
switched careers.
palliative care among your options?
I
Or how did that
did.
work out?
I
Mhm.
did. So long story short, I didn't pass one of my classes in nursing school.
Okay.
I had to wait 9 months
Uh,
um, for one class to finish up. Um, and so whenever I met with my instructors at the very end, I was thinking about going into psych nursing whenever I was supposed to graduate. Um, During the year, those 9 months, that's when COVID hit. And so, but I told them, I said, I think based on my capstone, which is the last semester before you go out into the nursing world, it's your last clinical course. And I always wanted closure
mhm.
with my patients.
Okay.
Um, I know that sounds crazy, but I wanted closure. Whenever you're in regular med surge nursing, sometimes you have your frequent flyer patients that come in and we see them more regularly, but for the most part, it's a one and done, and you can't really follow up with how they're doing. Um, Palliative care, I know where to look, which we all do look at the obituaries for the area to see if our patients have passed. So I can get closure with the patients that I work with. And on my unit, we are palliative care, end of life, inpatient hospice, but we're also an observation unit. So we have our med surge patients that we do, they are one and done, and they go off and hopefully they stay better. But then on the other hallway, we're mostly palliative care whenever, those beds are needed.
So you're working in a hospital,
Yes.
but it's the hospice palliative care
Yes.
hall of the
And
hospital.
I just was very blessed. God honestly opened the door for me to be on a palliative care floor. And whenever I told my instructors, I said, I really think I would like to do the end of life care. They looked at me and they said, that would be the perfect area for you to work in. And I said, I just want closure. I want closure. I want to be able to follow my patients. And so now I can most of the time.
Yeah.
I can do that.
That makes good sense to me. I have a daughter who's an RN, and of course, she had many choices of what to go into, but she didn't like med surge either because she wanted more of a relationship, an ongoing
Mhm.
relationship, and to be able to follow up with her
Right.
patients. So yeah, I understand that really well. Okay, so you've been with a lot of people as they are facing end of life and as they die, I assume. So
Yes.
this is not the most fun topic today for our podcast, but it
Not
is
at
one
all.
that we all face.
Yes.
I mean, like it or not, we're all going to face end of life someday, unless we're some of those that are alive when Jesus comes back, which,
Right.
we that would be cool, but we don't know that for a fact. So probably all of us are going to face that, and our loved ones are
Mhm.
going to face that. And I know that among our listeners today, there are many who have been really thankful for hospice care and palliative care for their loved ones, including me. So we want to talk about that a little bit today.
Mhm.
I know that you have all kinds of people, that you certainly have Christians and non-Christians
Mhm.
that come to you through palliative care. Can you tell me what the differences, have you observed differences between believers and unbelievers as they face end of life issues?
I have, and it all comes down to peace.
Mm.
There's a peace that is noticeable to most people that walk in the room whenever a believer is at the end of their lives. It's I know Chris Tomlin sings the song "I Will Rise," and it starts, "There's a peace I've come to know when my heart and flesh may fail. There's an anchor for my soul." I can say it as well. And I have a couple of examples of that, and I know we're going to get into, stories in a few moments, but one came last week whenever one of my patients, she was just, she's still alert, enough to be able to make her feelings known. And she just said she was tired of fighting. And so we were in her room and her pastor came to visit. And during that time, we gathered to pray at the bedside. And then they started singing. She likes music. And so there were different hymns that they sang, and one of them is "It Is Well." And before the singing started, before the prayer started, she said, I just want to go see Jesus. I just want to go see Jesus. And that peace was just, she didn't cry. She didn't mince her words. She just said, I want to go see Jesus. I want my kids to know him. And I want to go see my Lord. And that was sweet.
Yeah.
It was just sweet. And, a couple of my other patients, one of them, she couldn't remember anything. She couldn't remember people. She couldn't remember anything, but she could remember the words to "How Great Thou Art."
Oh, yeah.
And that peace was there. She wasn't in the hospital when, maybe she was in the hospital when she passed. I just wasn't there. But it was just sweet. There are just times that are just sweet. And it all has to do with peace. And there's a joy in the room that can't really be defined by anything other than Jesus.
So.
So,
Do you have coworkers who are unbelievers?
of course.
Have they ever commented on that piece?
Sometimes they'll say, they just looked really peaceful, because we have to do the ugly job of decedent care.
Right.
So we it can be very difficult, or it can be, an easier time, but we have to do the body bags and get them ready for the morgue. And there have been times where they commented, it almost looks like there's a smile on their face.
Mm-hmm.
And, that, yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah, that's the Bible says precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints, right?
That's right.
Now, I know that not everybody's death is pretty, even though they trust in God.
Mm-hmm.
Some people die in great pain and suffering, and it's not easy to watch. But
there are some that are the suffering is there, and we just can't get them comfortable.
Death is ugly. Death is the final enemy. So it's not like always a beautiful thing, but I do know enough people and have known enough people through my life, even though obviously I'm not as acquainted with the death and dying process as you are, but I've known my loved ones that I can say died with peace and a smile on their face. I think that's a precious gift of God.
It is. My grandmother died while Paul Creech was praying at her bedside. Like he was the pastor at the time, or he was the pastor at White Oaks at the time. And my dad asked him to come and pray with the family. And so with the circle of family around her during Paul Creech's prayer, which is sweet within itself, she passed. and she passed just as peacefully as she could.
I love
And it was just sweet. It was very sweet for all of us that were there. And those kind of memories that helped me to look into the end of life route as well. My grandfather, whenever he passed, unfortunately, this one is it's the reason why I became a palliative care nurse, is because it's the what not to do.
Okay.
We were withheld from seeing him for 6 hours. We didn't know he had passed.
Oh, no.
And they didn't tell us anything. They didn't share anything with us. They just called us at 6 o'clock in the morning and they told us that he had spiked a fever of 106. And we rushed to the hospital. My mom called the family, and we all met at the hospital. And they wouldn't let us go see him.
Mhm.
And so whenever I decided to do end of life care, whenever I was hired on, my theory, what I do or what my practice is I don't ever want to see anyone be withheld from seeing their family member,
Right.
even when it's tough. Because there are family dynamics are part of that process, and there are lots of different family dynamics. And even when someone is estranged, they still need the opportunity to call or come see. And a lot of times those patients will not go until that person is reached.
Yeah, that's right. They're holding on for someone. I've known that. I've known several instances of that too. Yeah, that's not, I mean, I would think, especially if they're estranged, it would be important to have that moment of reconciliation before they pass.
And we have those conversations with family members, not frequently because most of the time they're all there. But there are those times where they're like, oh, my sister is, such and such place. And like, well, at least call them, at least try to find a way to contact them. And people pass on their own terms. It's just, to me, it's incredible to watch. I had one lady, she was a loner, and her sister came, drove an hour and a half to see her, came, stayed, went to lunch. She said, now I'm going to lunch. I'm pretty sure she will go while I'm gone,
that's when
because
she wants to be
she's
alone.
a loner. She's a loner. And so she will more than likely go while I'm gone. Just call me, leave me a message, and we'll be back. I know my sister. And sure enough, they probably weren't even out to the parking lot. And she went all by herself in the room. If I can help it, I don't like for them to be alone, because from what I can understand, my grandfather was alone. And so I don't like for my patients to be alone. And there's a lot of comfort to family members in that whenever I say I watched them take their last breath, because they didn't go alone. And that means a lot to the family members.
Yeah, nobody really wants their loved one to die alone.
Right. Even if
that was one of the great tragedies of COVID, is that so many did have to die alone, or
yes,
maybe they had healthcare workers, but not family. So that was
right.
just heartbreaking for everyone.
For everyone. Mm-hmm. For everyone.
Well, so as you're helping both the dying and the grieving family, what are some of the things that are just really important? You've already spoken to some of them, but what are some of the things that you, as a believer especially, that you try to do during those times?
Kindness. You have to be kind. I've only been very stern once, like very stern once, to a family member. And usually we don't have to, because they're in such a place. But sometimes we have to be assertive. And she came and apologized to me. And she said, that won't alter his care, will it? And I said, absolutely not.
That's about that.
That's not who I am. I treat all of my patients as if they're extensions of my family.
That's wonderful.
And because of that, it's more loving care. And I try to establish a rapport with the family immediately. First of all, it's usually they notice that I do have an accent and they're like, you're not from around here, are you? Where are you from? And so that opens up a door for conversation. And they, a lot of times they recognize where I'm from, or they recognize where we just moved. We moved from North Carolina 3 years ago. And well, what part of North Carolina? Why are you here? My husband's a minister. It's like a whole conversation that, starts. And then based on where we live here, a lot of people, live in that area. And so that's a good conversation starter. But if I can find something in common with the family and build rapport from there, it makes a difference in the way they receive me, and they are more apt to listen to me as I give them care. And I'm not one of those nurses that doesn't tell the family anything. I'm pretty forward whenever it comes to what's going on in the dying process, because it is a process. Yes. And everyone's unique in the way they pass. But for the most part,
the signs and the progression.
The signs are the same, and the progression is generally the same. Of course, not everybody is going to go the same.
I've been thankful for the knowledge of healthcare workers during those processes in our family. So, have you ever had the opportunity to call in your husband or another minister for a family? No.
We are required to call the chaplains.
I see.
And they,
so you have designated
especially after they pass, they have paperwork that needs to be completed. So we're required to call the chaplains, and our chaplains on staff are fabulous. And they work with us. They work with the families. There are some families that don't want chaplain involvement. And that's their right to,
what would you say is the percentage of families that do want someone?
Most everyone does.
Almost everyone. At the time when it actually comes time to die, they want a minister or a spiritual leader involved.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of people find comfort, if they know, which most of the time they know who I am as a believer. And a lot of times there's comfort in the family, that I'm there because they know who I am. I've had a family, we got pretty close because the patient was there for a while, and she was younger, and because of that, she didn't pass quite as quickly. And so I built a relationship with the family. And I think it was the day before she passed, or a couple of days before, they gathered around the bed, and they asked me to lead them in prayer, and to pray for her specifically. And that was touching. And one of the other girls that I work with, she was in the room. And so now if someone says something, she'll be like, you should ask Kristen to pray. She can pray. And so there's that testament of, Jesus is there. I mean, he's there, and he brings comfort to those families that need it, and everybody needs it at some point or another. And there are so many comfort ways, there are ways to be comforted. And I'm thankful that prayer and singing are just a couple that we've used, and just hugs. I can hug everybody.
Awesome.
And I'll ask, like, do you mind a hug? And I had a patient, it's been a while, but the family member was going for a scan to confirm a cancer diagnosis. And I got really close to them in just not even a 24-hour period. And I knew what the results were whenever they came up. It was before the patient came up, and the daughter was standing outside the door trying not to lose it.
Yeah.
And so I walked over to her because I knew the results, and I knew she knew the results based on the report that I had been given from the scan, the radiologists. And so I just looked at her. I said, "Can I give you a hug?" And she just broke down. And I said, "I think we both need one," because, we both needed one. We both needed a hug. And so whenever the other family members came up, it was just kind of a hug fest. But
That's awesome, though.
and they were it, and they actually put in a comment about how empathetic I was during that cancer diagnosis. It was a very difficult time for them, but just a hug made it a little sweeter. So
you haven't enumerated them in bullet points, but just highlighting some of the things you've said. You've talked about kindness and empathy. You've talked about physical touch. You've talked about prayer. You've talked about singing. You've talked about calling in chaplains. So there are so many ways in which this is a ministry.
It is.
To both the dying and the families of the dying. Do you wish that there were a lot more Christians in palliative care?
Yes, of course.
So as if there is anyone out there listening that has considered vocations, you would give them a nudge in that direction, because it's an experience common to everyone. And I would think a specific window of opportunity where they're obviously thinking about eternal values and their own life and what's going to happen at the end of their own life. And besides all of that, even just to be there to comfort someone when they are walking through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yes.
It's just such a Christ-like ministry. And I thank you for doing that, Kristen. I really do.
I
like your perspective is really good for us to hear.
And one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, please share with us.
One of my favorite stories. It was this patient. He just stuck around. We
didn't want to go.
We call it guppy breathing. Like it's the very
shallow,
very shallow breathing. A week.
Oh my.
1 week.
You were waiting for every breath to be his last, probably.
Yes, we watched him like a hawk, because we were expecting him to go at any minute. And his kids, they were like, "Listen, we just can't be here. It's just too much for us to be here." Yes. And so he had been a minister for 30 years. And so I went in his room, and I noticed a change in his breathing. And I just whispered, and I shut the door, and I whispered in his ear, and I said, "Go get your crown. Go see Jesus." I said, "You've been faithful. Go hear it." It wasn't even 20 seconds, and he breathed his last breath.
You just sort of escorted him, gave him
permission. It was just sweet. It was just so sweet. And it was just something it was between the two of us, And
did you tell his family that you did that?
I think I did.
Okay.
I think I did.
They probably will.
And I said, I was like, that's just between that patient and myself. Right. And he went to see Jesus. Yeah. That moment, that second, he went to see Jesus. And
because that's
he heard, "Well done."
To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
With
So
the Lord. Mm-hmm.
I love that. And one of the other thing you've talked about, just sort of touched on, is that telling people the truth and being plain about the truth. I had an experience with that when my mother-in-law passed away. My mother-in-law's pretty well known in Free Will Baptist, Miss Mac, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Catherine McDonald. She was in a live hospice here in Nashville when she passed from cancer. And about 2 days before she passed away, she had a precious visitor. Dr. Laverne Miley came to see her.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I happened to have the privilege of being there in the room,
Mm.
listening to their conversation. And, all of us in the family, we're not trained. You don't want to come right out and just say, you're dying.
Right.
But, I mean, she knew she was dying. We all knew she was dying, but we had not actually really talked about
Right.
dying and the fact that she was dying. But Dr. Miley came in and he had his little black New Testament and he went over to the bedside and he took her hand and he said, "Catherine, heaven is real and Jesus is waiting for you." And, they both had tears in their eyes and he read some scripture and she thanked him. And I thought, I just stood on the other side of the room thinking, I feel like I've got one foot in eternity already to hear this conversation
Mm-hmm.
and how he did not beat around the bush.
Right.
He went straight to what was undoubtedly foremost in her mind,
Mm-hmm.
that none of us had the courage to go there.
Right.
I just thought, what a precious and Christ-like man. And then it wasn't but about 2 months later that Dr. Miley himself passed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
and so I was just like, yeah, he taught me something that day,
Mm-hmm.
because surely as a doctor and a medical missionary, he had been with many dying people.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew what you know, is that to evade the issue and not talk about it is not what they need.
Right.
They have, that's what's on their mind. They
Yes.
have, questions, and it meant so much to her. I could tell, for him to just to the chase.
That's it. Yeah.
Catherine, Jesus is waiting for you,
Mm-hmm.
and heaven is real, and you're going to
And
go
that's
see.
just sweet.
It was so sweet. Will always be grateful that I was there in that instance.
Absolutely.
So it's a real thing. It's a very precious ministry. And I want to ask you a question. How do you keep from being down or depressed when you know that your patients are not going to get better, they're going to pass away? And that a lot of people would consider that to be kind of a depressing career choice. So how do you stay encouraged?
I will say it can be depressing, and there are days that are harder than others.
Especially when you know someone is not prepared for eternity. I'm sure that's just crushing.
And sometimes we're not prepared for them to go, as far as, it can happen a lot quicker than we expect it. There was one day, Carson had been diagnosed with COVID. I had 3 patients pass, and one of my best friends had a miscarriage on the same day. So it wasn't just professional issues, it was personal issues. And I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to cry. You have to be able to get rid of it.
You are human after all.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
I'm not Superwoman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not Superwoman. And so I went to the break room, or to the nutrition room where we can, and I lost it. And there are times where you just have to walk away for a minute, gather your thoughts, pray, and say, okay, Lord, let me finish this day with success. On my way to work every day, I pray, Father, help me to minister to my patients efficiently and effectively each day. So through this day, help me to minister to my patients efficiently and effectively. And then I pray for the ones that I have. If it's a 2-day in a row, I pray for the patients that I'm going to get, because I don't know who I'm going to get. the first day. But if I'm there the second day, I pray for each patient individually. And I'm nosy enough on my floor to really know who all is on the floor. So all the 10 patients on my side, I pray for them because I don't know what their situation is. But if I have to come in contact with even not my patients, it's still a ministry. It's still a ministry. And I work at a Catholic hospital. And so in our tenets, I guess you can say, and everything that we do is considered a ministry.
Right.
And that's what it's called in every documentation that we have. It is a ministry. And that, aside from the Catholic part of it, it truly is a ministry to me. And I love that aspect of my job, because my job, my place of employment recognizes that everything that we do in the hospital is a ministry. I appreciate that.
I do too.
Because
And
it
I
is.
know I'm getting into a sticky, my UK friends would say a sticky wicket here. But I spent many years of my life in Japan. And honestly, the Catholic Church has done a tremendous job in Japan showing compassion,
Yes.
particularly in healthcare and orphanages and things like that. So I know that we have differences as Protestants than from our Catholic friends, but their influence in Japan has been very positive and left a positive testimony for Christianity. So I will stop there.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want to get into, confusing and controversial areas.
Exactly.
But the Catholic Church has historically done a good job at humanitarian ministries and helping with just human suffering and healthcare and the like.
Exactly.
So I understand what you're saying very well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what can Christians who are not actually workers in palliative care or hospice, how can we support you and those that are in ministries like you?
Pray for us, encourage us.
Mm-hmm.
It is difficult to see people die regularly. I'm thankful I'm not in the emergency setting, because to me, there's a difference in the expectation of death than the tragedy of not being, of it not being expected. Carson and I, we witnessed a fatal accident last year.
Carson,
and
correct.
He's my son. Arabella was in the back seat, but she really didn't see anything. And so we were going the opposite direction, and we witnessed this fatal accident. And it hit differently because we knew that it was unexpected. It was tragic. It was shocking. And there's something to be said about being able to work directly with those who are expecting the death. It doesn't ease the blow of death. There's still that sting of death, but it's expected more so.
I've often, my husband and I, maybe we're weird, but we've talked, it's kind of like a really bad would you rather joke. When you start to talk about would you rather die unexpectedly in something like a car crash, or would you rather know that you're going to pass? And the same for your loved ones. Would you rather they die unexpectedly, or would you rather know? And there are pluses and minuses to each. That's why I say it's a really bad would you rather joke. But it is a gift in some ways to have the opportunity to prepare for death. And I'm always, especially for those that have accounts to settle and relationships to clear up and, legacies that they want to intentionally leave. I would think it's a real gift to have a little time to prepare.
It is. And then there are they're the gift moments, and that's what we call them. Sometimes or a rally. A lot of people call them a rally. Whenever the person is completely unresponsive and then they become lucid and they talk
It
or
happens a lot, doesn't it?
sing. It does.
We know that.
It happens a lot. And, then the people that have made the decisions to make them comfort care, they begin to second guess themselves.
Right. They're getting better.
Hey, look at this.
But
There's hope. We have hope of them turning around. Don't ever second guess the decisions that you make as a family member. Don't second guess those decisions. Those are just gift moments. They're blessings. They're just gifts. Don't second guess yourself, because what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah, that the evidence about rallies, that what you call gift moments, is so prevalent in literature about death and dying. And I hope that most of us know that when that happens, it's an anomaly. They're not getting better. They're just, as a matter of fact, it's kind of a sign.
It's a speed bump.
Very imminent.
They speed up the process because they use all their energy into those rally moments in order to expend it and spend some time with their family. And there are a lot of family members who they accept the pain that they're in order to spend that time with family while they're lucid. So there's so many younger cancer patients that we've had. They know that so many family members are coming on Monday at 10. So they don't want pain meds before, because they want to be coherent enough to be able to converse with them and have that gift time. And so they know that it's going to take hours to get them caught back up once those family members leave. But once they get caught up, they get comfortable, and those family members appreciate the time that they've had. So it's not always a bad thing. Just accept it as a gift.
Kind of like one final expression of unconditional love, sacrificial love, that I'm willing to put up with pain, in order to spend time with my loved ones before I go.
Yes.
And it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
All right. So I know that sometimes hospices, maybe not your hospital, but sometimes hospices accept practical donations of things like flowers and things like that. I know sometimes people give their wedding flowers to hospice, and they remake them into things for the patients. Is there anything else just on the practical level that you wish people knew about supporting palliative care, or not really?
I really don't know that aspect of the out of the hospital. At the hospital, we can't really accept gifts, like monetary gifts and those kind of things. If it's for the whole team, we can accept it. So if a family member wants to bring cookies or something like that, we always ask that you have enough for the entire, like all the coworkers that come in. If you send a card, it's very, very meaningful to us. One of our families just recently sent us a card with the obituary, the patient's obituary in it. And that was so sweet because, first of all, me now, closure.
Yes.
I finally got my closure on that patient. But then it's sweet because we can see what the family thought during that process. And so it's nice when people do things. One of our patients, the one that I actually prayed with, the family, they brought in photos that she had done, that she had taken, and we have them hanging in our around our board at the nurses station, and nobody said anything to us about it yet. So we're keeping them up as long as they
As long as they don't tell
stay
you to remove them.
there. And she's been gone for several months now. So I think we're okay keeping them up. But everybody, there's always something, and so it's just a sweet. It's sweet to get recognition for what we've done, but it's not expected, and it's not necessary because we're still going to do what we do.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate that. We've hit on that on that little point a few times through the months with the podcast about how we as the children of God should be encouraging people and thanking people and acknowledging what they've done to minister to us and to our loved ones. So I would encourage all of our listeners that if you know someone who's working in healthcare in general, in emergency or trauma, or they're a first responder, or they're working in palliative care, take an opportunity to drop them a card or somehow express to them that you appreciate the difficult job they're doing. And the ministry that it is to, even if it's not your family, to some families that are going.
And it's helpful. Honestly, it's helpful to have a spouse that supports. Last week during Nurses Week, it was Nurses Week. And every day, it wasn't anything big, but every day during Nurses Week, he had me something special, just something. I mean, it could have been a candy bar. It wasn't much.
Yeah.
But he had something special for me every day for Nurses Week. And on my hard days, I know he prays for me. I'll send him a message. I'll say, please pray for me today. It's going to be a hard one, especially if there are multiple patients that are actively dying. And because I could lose both of them, I could lose one of them. I might not lose any of them that day. But just knowing that multiples could happen, that's a harder day, especially if I get close to the family. It becomes a harder day because, like I said, they're an extension of my family. If I treat them as such, I'm going to treat them well.
Right.
And I'm going to, be the family member that can be the rock for them while they're there crying.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for who you are. And thank you for your time today to share with us, because we entitled I'm going to entitle the episode "When I Come to Die," because it's a common experience to us all. And I pray that there will be many more like you. I think it's really wonderful to think about the fact that the people on your floor at your hospital all have somebody praying for them when they come to die. I think that is very glorifying to Christ. And I know that's the way he would want it. So to those of us listening, pray for your healthcare workers, pray for those who are facing death in their family or in their own lives. And thank you for listening to us today on this somewhat difficult topic, but very important to all of us. I think it's a way that we can honor Christ and honor his masterpieces, the creation, the people he's created in his image. So I just thank you for your time today. And I pray that that God's blessings will go with you, Kristen, and all the ones who joined us today.
Thank you.